When people think about moving to St. George, Utah, they often think about breathtaking red rock views, year-round sunshine, safer community, and a slower pace of life. But after living here for over a decade and helping hundreds of people relocate to St. George, Utah, we've learned what people really discover after settling in. Today, I'm going to be sharing 5 biggest things that I've learned living in St. George, Utah for the last decade, including surprises, trade-offs, and even some of the things that I wish I would have known prior to moving here. We're Nick and Michon. We are local real estate agents right here in St. George. And every day we help people just like you find a perfect place in Southern Utah that you can call home. Let's start with the first thing that I noticed after moving here over 10 years ago. Let's just start with the fact that I was born in Russia and spent a large portion of my life growing up in Chicago. And I'm certainly not scared of the boogeyman in a dark alley. I've encountered a few while living across various parts of the world, and it's just not that impressive. However, after living here for 10 years, the situation for me has changed because now I have a family and I just can't always be there for them to mop up the floor with a boogeyman. And to put things into perspective, I'm so careful now that we don't even take road trips into the areas with high crime rate, just because I believe that avoidance is the best way to prevent bad things from actually happening to you. It seems as though the combination of a relatively high cost of living, tight-knit communities where neighbors still look out for one another, and a mostly conservative state legislation that still allows for law enforcement to do their job is what is keeping St. George so safe. According to bestplaces.net, St. George Crime Index is at just 11.2 compared to the national average of 22.7. So it's half than what's normal from a national perspective right now. I know these numbers are meaningless unless we compare them. So for instance, Seattle is at 32.3 compared to 11.2 in St. George for violent, 76 for property crime. Los Angeles is at 29 for violent and 35 for property. Chicago is at 50 for violent and 46 for property. We used to say, come Chicago for the food and stay because you got murdered. Over the last 10 years, population of St. George has grown by nearly 43%. We increased from 73,000 to 102,000 residents in this area. Even with this growth and nearly doubling its size, we're not really seeing any new crime. And I think that the tight-knit community, the neighbors caring for other neighbors, and a relatively expensive cost of living, relatively high cost of living, is keeping this area still pretty safe. I'm willing to go as far as saying that maybe in the initial stages of your research and you're looking at moving into this area, I would encourage anybody during your visit, get in your car and just drive around the neighborhoods, drive around the parts, and I'll link the video. You can look at the comments to see the sketchiest parts of Southern Utah. If you got in your car and drove around there and even got out of your car and walked around any time of day or night, I doubt that you would feel unsafe or even remotely threatened. And unfortunately, that is not something that I could promise for pretty much any other part of America in 2025. If you have done any research, you may already know that Utah is pro-Second Amendment. Now, typically in these videos, the second I mention Second Amendment, this starts arguments in the comments depending on people's political views and opinions. This is not why I'm bringing this up. I think that statistically speaking, it is almost irrefutable that an armed society happens to be a polite society. So anybody that enters a state that has relatively relaxed gun laws typically assumes that everyone around you is armed. And if you happen to share these beliefs, constitutional carry gives you that layer of protection here. The natural beauty of Southern Utah will never get old. Even after living here for over 10 years, I still find the local southwestern landscapes absolutely stunning. Right after moving to St. George, I simply couldn't believe my eyes. Every day, driving to and from work and just going everywhere. If you've never been to this part of the world, it is just simply mind-blowing. You have got to experience it. Prior to moving to St. George, all I knew about Southern Utah, or Utah in general, is that somewhere in the state of Utah, there is the Bonneville Salt Flats. It is known for the Bonneville Bonneville Speed Week. Some of the fastest vehicles they're able to traverse on land were able to set the speed records there. So my knowledge was just that. And my understanding of the rest of the state was just a big desert with a whole lot of nothing. And I couldn't be further from the truth. Sean and I take several RV trips throughout the year. Try to get out of here when it gets a little bit too hot, and usually early spring when we have a little bit more free time, we try to go visit my family in Wisconsin. So we get to go not quite coast to coast, but pretty close. And every time as we pass through some beautiful parts of the country, we try to think and compare, how does this compare to home? And upon our return, we always determine that we're not even sure why we left. In our latest adventure, we got stuck in Wyoming. April in Wyoming does not mean much. It means that if you're traveling down I-80, there's still a good chance that you get blown in by snow and now you're stuck there. So every time we leave this area, it seems like we're actually moving away from all the adventure, because within a day trip, you're within reach of several state parks. If you want to go to the ocean, you're no more than 8 hours away. If you want to go to the mountains, you are less than 40 minutes away. Right now, we're walking through Snow Canyon State Park. And for most people that have never visited this area, this stuff probably looks like another planet. If you're into pretty much anything off-road related, whether it's Jeeps, side-by-sides, mountain bikes, Southern Utah is basically God's playground for that kind of stuff. Sand Hollow State Park hosts several off-road events and expos, anything from the winter Jeep Jamboree to Matt's off-road towing and recovery events on the beach. UTV takeover is a huge thing that happens in the fall. Now this part of the video, this right here, is where I warn you. If you're not even that outdoorsy, you don't really see yourself mountain biking or doing any of this stuff, coming to St. George, Utah, or anywhere in Southern Utah could be dangerous, because I fell into that category when I first moved here. And before you know it, our garage filled up with bikes, dirt bikes, side-by-sides, Jeeps, all of the things that you could do outdoors. A lot of these hobbies, especially if you start building custom Jeeps or collecting boats, could get quite costly. Real estate prices in St. George might surprise you. How often do you hear that you should have bought more real estate sooner, even if you were 12 years old in 2008? I was 21, but I was still $1 shy and 5 minutes late. Real estate was never on my mind, and I wanted to take you guys on a tour of what used to look like the very first place I lived in. In fact, I lived right across the street when I first moved to St. George, and I want to share a little bit of information with you because this will really put things in perspective. And before we begin, I'd like to thank the listing agent, Kimet Hughes, for giving us an opportunity to show this place. This townhome has been thoroughly upgraded, and I will post a link in the listing in the description below this video. So if you're in the market for a nice townhome that you could have at 4.99% interest rate right now, which is almost unheard of, this is not, however, the reason why I brought you here. So in 2014, when I first moved to St. George, I lived in a townhome in Hidden Valley. The exact floor plan was number 44. We're in a number 66 right now. We're directly across the street. I was paying $1,300 a month for rent. It is a 3-bed, 2-bath, 2-car garage unit. Super nice community. The best utility companies. This place is great, but it was $1,300 a month for me to rent it. And at the time, the landlord was planning to put it on the market, so that unit was offered to me for just $165,000. And I thought to myself, it was a fair amount of money. Mind you, this was almost 11 years ago. The unit that we're in right now is currently on the market for $429. And if you were to rent one of these, you'd be probably looking at about $2,200 to $2,300 a month. We find that a lot of people still have expectations from 10 plus years ago when talking real estate prices. Unfortunately, we don't live there anymore, and we will never live there again. And whether you attribute the home appreciation to purely home appreciation or hyperinflation of the US dollar or devaluation of the US dollar, this is the reality that we're dealing with. And being in love with the past has never served anybody well. Michonne and I still encounter quite a few people from outside of the state that have never been to Southern Utah or even Utah period, that expect to get more home or more luxury for their budget. and they're severely disappointed when they realize what things actually cost around here. Just to put things in perspective, St. George proper is pretty well built out. Like this part of town, you go a little bit further south, it pretty much butts up against the desert, so we're built out all the way to the Arizona border. And as we go north out towards Hurricane, this is where you still see some of the development. So a lot of the low-hanging fruit that didn't have to be dynamited or over-excavated or spent substantial amount of money to be developed is already developed. And that real estate has appreciated. Average lot size in Washington County right now is less than a quarter acre. So a lot of the new permits that are being pulled are for much smaller quarter acre or less lots. So if you are one of those people that's looking for acreage and you think that Utah is a giant desert, you should be prepared to spend some money for every acre you own. And if you're looking at raw land, an average quarter acre lot right now sells for around $230,000. So if you do the math on new construction, this is kind of your base, plus the cost of the home goes on top of that. So that's where a lot of these prices start. We help clients understand where the best long-term value is and which neighborhoods give you the most long-term buck for your money. What I'd like you to take away from this is, next to picking the wrong location, the biggest mistake that most people make is when they think of their primary home as an investment, when in reality, it's a liability. If you go to Investopedia.com and look up investment terms, an investment by definition is something that is supposed to be making you money via either cash flow or dividends. And in case with your primary residence, it is a liability because it's costing you for principal pay down, it's costing you for taxes, it's costing you for insurance and any of the associated repairs. So the only way that you could capitalize on that equity is by either selling it or borrowing against it. So when selecting a home, you should always have the best real estate professional in your corner so that you could best figure out what it is that your family needs, what it is that is going to suit your needs the best, and what it is that best fits into your financial picture. Most people that you will meet in St. George are great, but there is a small caveat. After living here for almost 11 years, I have to tell you guys, some of the nicest, most genuine people that I have ever met would have to be here in St. George, Utah. I was always impressed by the kindness of the locals, and specifically the people that were born and raised here. When I first moved here, I felt like it was almost like a refreshing throwback in time, because having lived in Chicago and a lot of bigger cities, it just isn't the same. Like the human connection often feels like it's missing. If I were to give you an example, like if you were lost any place in St. George and you asked a stranger for directions, there's a good chance that they would not only walk you there, they would also offer you water and make sure that you got there safely. Now, I may be a little bit biased because St. George is actually the longest that I have lived in one place. Ever since I was a little boy, my family relocated, moved around, and in my adult life in corporate America, I have bounced around and I basically went wherever the money was. If I could claim one trophy in life, it would be adaptability. I've never had to fit in. I feel like just kind of make myself at home, make my connections. And with that being said, I have met my wife here. I have met most of my really good friends here. In fact, one of my best friends is from St. George, Utah. One of the most commonly asked questions, probably in like the top 2 or 3 questions that people kind of tiptoe around the second they call us, is, hey, we heard that Southern Utah has a lot of Mormons. What is it like to have a Mormon neighbor? Not everybody here is Mormon, but I'd like to answer the question of what it's like to live around Mormons from a somewhat unbiased perspective, just using some of the internet wisdom and some of the wisdom that comes from generations before. So I'm gonna read some of this for you guys because there's this fairy tale that I find that's very, very relatable on a topic of just moving to a new place. So if you find yourself in a position where you're getting ready to make a move, whether you're moving to St. George or anywhere else in the world, I think that this is applicable because this is old wisdom. The old man sat on a weathered stone bench outside of the city gate, his gaze fixed on the endless horizon beyond the busting walls. He was a familiar sight to the travelers passing through. Many stopped to speak with him, drawn by his peaceful presence and a sense of wisdom, emanating from his stillness. A common question travelers posed to the old man was, what kind of people live in this city? He would respond with a question of his own. What kind of people live in a place where you came from? If the travelers described the place filled with dishonesty, unkindness, the old man would softly reply, "Continue on, for you will find only bad people here." But if they spoke of a place filled with good, honest, hardworking people, a gentle smile would touch his lips as he said, "Enter, for here too you will find only good people." The old man's answers, simple yet profound, served as a mirror reflecting the travelers' own perspectives and expectations back at them. He understood that the world, both within and outside the city walls, was often shaped by the lens through which one chooses to view it, and that one's own character influenced the kindness and good they encountered. He did not judge the city or its inhabitants, but rather invited others to look within themselves to discover what they would find. So be mindful of the lens that you look through prior to moving to the new place would be my biggest takeaway after bouncing around all over and making St. George my home. Now, I understand that individual experiences may vary, and a lot of our viewers are making a big life decision by moving here, having spent majority of their life somewhere else. So I'd like to share with you what could be one of the worst things that you could expect from having a Mormon neighbor, at least from my own experience. You might get invited to a game of church basketball, maybe a game of pickleball, and surely as soon as you move into the community, a friendly neighbor might drop off a plate of warm cookies. That's about the extent of intrusion into your life. So I don't know if that's a big deal for you. It hasn't been a big deal for me. Let's talk a little bit about St. George job market. You have got to be extraordinary at something because local job market most certainly does not support the way of living in St. George. In 2025, it seems like it's nearly impossible for an average American to outpace the rate of inflation. And you have to ask yourself, why is it that some people live the life of abundance in Southern Utah while others just barely manage to make the ends meet? Back in 2014, corporate job relocation is what brought me to St. George. After about a year, I met Michonne and I knew that I wanted to stay here, and I ran into a challenge. In order for me to keep progressing with my corporate employment and in order to continue to pursue career advancement, so I felt like I was hitting a dead end with my corporate gig. Then one of my crazy friends suggested that I should get a real estate license. So over 12 years of job security, comfort, 401k, healthcare, benefits, all of these things just went out the window. Michonne and I were the first agents to start a YouTube channel right here in St. George. And I hope that doesn't inspire you to look further back and see how truly bad I used to be on camera, and I still am. Michonne's just the face of the company now, and I feel like she's a natural at it, even though if you ask her, she's probably not going to agree with you. According to bestplaces.net, St. George and Utah in general, Southern Utah, cost of living is at about 110%, meaning that it's actually 10% more expensive to live here compared to living anywhere else in the United States. So what jobs do really well here? Because there are a ton of people making a ton of money here. I mean, just look at this neighborhood. And there are plenty of neighborhoods just like this one right here in St. George. In 2025, Washington, Utah was recognized as one of the best places to start a small business by several online publicists. And no, I'm not saying that you should start a business right now, but given the difficulty of survival in America in 2025 and the challenging local economic market, might be a great thing to consider. St. George and Southern Utah has a very high concentration of wildly successful people. Maybe because the area just attracts people because it's great to live here, or it could be because it is pretty difficult to survive here on local wages. Our clients that already have extraordinary positions with tech companies or any companies that allow remote employment do really well here, especially if they could stick to the current pay bracket that they already have. Narrow specialists, medical professionals, people that are bringing new businesses into the area could greatly benefit from the booming population of Southern Utah. My point is this: if you aren't already doing something extraordinary, it is never too late to start. And no, I'm not suggesting that you start an MLM or get a real estate license. I'm simply, guys, this is too good not to share. So as we were finishing filming this part, it was starting to get too dark. We were running out of daylight, and I was starting to realize that it's the 24th of July, and we just spent all day, the entire day, working again. And to give you a little bit more context, 24th of July is a big holiday for anybody in Utah. It's the Pioneer Day, which is celebrated equally to the 4th of July, and I would say probably not even equally, like the amount of fireworks is even greater. So some of the guilt was starting to settle in, and I was starting to feel terrible because instead of doing the things that normal kids do, our daughter was just hanging out with us, and Michonne and I just spent another day working from sunup to sundown, which is really, it's a blessing to have the opportunity, but the parent in me was starting to feel terrible. So we decided to just cut the video there, and since we didn't have any more daylight left anyway, we ran to the grocery store. It was 9 o'clock. We stopped at Harmon's, and I was just trying to get some sparklers so that our 3-year-old could celebrate the 24th. As we were walking around the aisles of the Harmon's grocery store, I hear somebody say, "Excuse me, sir," and this was a stranger. Like I looked over, and he was looking at me as if he knew me. His name was Tate. Tate is a gentleman that I spoke to a couple of years ago. He told me, "Nick, you probably don't know me. Like, we were following each other on Instagram. 3 years ago, we spoke, and it inspired me to move to St. George." And I asked him how things were going, how he was doing. He's like, "You're right. Like, it's pretty tough to find employment here. And instead of trying to go through all the madness, I just decided to start my own business, and the business is doing great. So I just wanted to tap you on the shoulder and thank you so much for having that inspiring conversation." And the timing of it all was absolutely insane, because literally moments prior to speaking to Tate, I had some doubts. I thought to myself that maybe I'm rambling on about all of these extraordinary things, and this really only makes sense to me. Maybe it's just all in my head, and this is all not serving any purpose, right? And like, the lack of purpose would be my biggest concern. But how insane is this? Is this the law of attraction? Is this the power of the universe, or is it the man himself? I sent Tate this Instagram message the following morning because I figured if I mention this in the video, it's just going to be really hard to believe, and people are going to say, "Well, you're just selling us on a dream, and sure, that happened." But no, these messages are from the morning after the 25th of July, so you guys can see how wild is this. So my point is this: if you aren't already doing something extraordinary, it is never too late to start. Now, I don't encourage you to start an MLM or get a real estate license. I'm simply encouraging you, if you're considering moving to Southern Utah, you should really follow your dreams to the fullest and really think about what it is that may be extraordinary in your life that would give you the lifestyle that your family deserves and that you wish. I encourage you to believe in abundance of this world. Far too often, we see keyboard warriors in the comments saying how difficult it is to live in St. George, or really pretty much anywhere else in the world, and how impossible it is, and how things are this, that, or why things won't work out. But if you want extraordinary life, is it even fair to expect extraordinary results while doing ordinary activities?